The storm died at dawn, and dust hung like smoke over Whitlow. The saloon doors shivered as boots scraped silence into splinters. Ethan Cole stood apart, counting breaths and deaths. Clara Wynn said, "You look like you heard a sermon you won't survive." He did not smile, and the street did not either. Jesse Pike hurried from the livery, eyes fierce with worry. Abram Hale said, "Keep your head low, son, and your hands lower." A rifle cracked beyond the church, and the town flinched as one. The doors burst wide and blood found the floor before the man did. Reverend Thomas Pike said, "They took the North Road, and they left no mercy." Ethan felt an old weight lift and lock across his spine. Silas Crane said, "Order will be paid for, one way or the other." Clara stared at Ethan, and the room held its breath with her. Ethan said, "News rides faster than regret, but not by much." The wind pushed dust through the doorway like a verdict. Somewhere a colt neighed, and the sound trembled into stillness. The rider bled a map across the boards, and silence mapped the room back. Ethan knelt, and the floor answered with a groan. Clara Wynn said, "Say the name, and we will know the distance." The rider rasped air that tasted of iron and rain. Abram Hale said, "Hold steady, we need the road and the count." The rider whispered a place that had been avoided like a grave. Jesse Pike said, "North Gulch, and the old mine, I reckon." Ethan closed his eyes and saw a narrower world. Silas Crane said, "Then the council meets, and we decide our peace." The room did not trust the word peace from his mouth. Clara took Ethan's wrist and felt the tremor he tried to bury. Ethan said, "I left parts of myself in that gulch." The storm outside had moved on, but its echo stayed. They carried the wounded to the church, and the bell watched like a blind sentinel. Reverend Thomas Pike said, "Lay him near the altar, and lay your anger outside." Ethan set the stretcher down and did not argue. Clara Wynn said, "If the mine hides them, the town will not." Jesse Pike muttered a prayer he half remembered. Abram Hale said, "We count rifles, not wishes." The rider tried to speak and failed, and the candles guttered. Silas Crane said, "We will not chase ghosts without levy." Ethan stared at the cross and saw a scaffold. Clara said, "You said you would not run again." Ethan said, "I said it, and I meant it, but meaning is poor cover." Wind pressed the windows, and the air smelled of storm and fear. Word ran ahead of truth, and the market square bristled with rumor. Clara Wynn said, "They will choose safety, and safety will cost us our souls." Ethan walked the perimeter of his past and found no exit. Jesse Pike said, "I can ride ahead and mark trails." Abram Hale said, "You can learn to come back alive first." Silas Crane addressed the gathered and sold calm like whiskey. Ethan listened and heard the price in every cheer. Clara said, "If we wait, they will set the terms with blood." Ethan said, "Then we take the road before noon." A hawk circled, and its shadow crossed his boots. The dust rose again, as if the storm had left something unfinished. Saddles thudded like drums, and the road unrolled toward the gulch. Clara Wynn said, "You owe nothing, yet you pay anyway." Ethan tightened the cinch and did not look up. Jesse Pike said, "I will keep watch on the ridges." Abram Hale said, "You will keep close until I say otherwise." Silas Crane sent 2 riders, and their smiles held ledgers. Ethan said, "If we find them, we bring home more than answers." Clara smiled without joy and checked her pistol. The sun broke clean, and the town shrank behind them. Ethan heard the mine before he saw it, like a throat clearing. The day had only begun, and already it felt used up. The road narrowed into scrubland, and silence kept pace with the riders. Ethan Cole said, "Every mile digs deeper into old bones." Clara Wynn glanced ahead and whispered, "Bones can be buried, but they never rest." Jesse Pike urged his horse faster, eager and restless. Abram Hale barked, "Hold your line, boy, or you'll vanish like smoke." Silas Crane's riders lagged, but watched every move. The horizon shimmered with heat, a mirage of truth and threat. Ethan's jaw worked as though grinding down memories. Clara said, "You came back for this road once before, didn't you?" Ethan muttered, "And I bled out pieces I never found again." A hawk screeched overhead, and the land seemed to echo its warning. The gulch opened wide, carved by storms and regret. Ethan halted, staring into the hollow where echoes lived. Abram Hale said, "Last time we rode here we buried more than strangers." Jesse Pike swallowed hard and said, "Looks like graves still waiting." Clara Wynn tightened her coat, eyes steady. She said, "If ghosts live here, they walk in boots." Silas Crane's riders exchanged glances, their smirks too polished for fear. Ethan muttered, "This ground knows my name better than I do." The wind slid across the canyon, carrying dust and memory. Abram said, "We count the signs first, no rush to judgment." Ethan nodded, though his heart beat like a drum against a coffin lid. They dismounted where the canyon throat narrowed, boots striking stone with dull thuds. Clara Wynn said, "Tracks fresh, too many to count." Abram Hale crouched and traced the earth with rough fingers. He said, "Men, horses, wagons, they've been here less than a day." Jesse Pike said, "Then they could still be near." Ethan Cole drew his revolver slowly, as if testing its weight. He said, "Close enough that breath could carry their names." Silas Crane's riders hung back, feigning indifference. Clara whispered, "This place waits for violence. I can feel it." Ethan answered, "Violence doesn't wait, it lingers." The canyon swallowed his words like a confession carved in stone. Night settled fast, draping the canyon in ink and whispers. A campfire cracked, throwing sparks into the wind. Jesse Pike said, "Fire draws eyes, and eyes here ain't friendly." Abram Hale said, "Darkness draws bullets quicker than flame." Clara Wynn cleaned her pistol with steady hands, lips tight. Ethan Cole stared into the flames, seeing more than fire. He said, "This ground doesn't forgive, and neither will I." Silas Crane's riders muttered quietly, their laughter brittle as glass. The canyon walls pressed closer, like a coffin tightening. Clara said, "When dawn comes, we'll know if redemption's a lie." Ethan replied, "Redemption's a debt, not a gift." The flames spat sparks high, swallowed by the dark above. Dawn bled across the canyon rim, pale and unforgiving. Ethan Cole rose, his coat dusted with ash. Clara Wynn said, "You didn't sleep?" He replied, "Sleep wouldn't have me." Jesse Pike stretched, rubbing his eyes, eager but weary. Abram Hale said, "Today we meet whatever waits, and we don't flinch." Ethan tightened his holster and said, "Flinching's been beaten out of me." Clara looked toward the gulch mouth, where shadows pooled like ink. Silas Crane's riders saddled their horses, muttering about levies and claims. The wind carried a cry from far off, sharp and brief. Jesse whispered, "That sounded like someone running out of hope." Ethan said, "Hope dies loud out here." The sun rose higher, showing scars across the land. The path into the old mine sloped like a swallowed secret, and the air tasted of iron. Ethan Cole said, "Tracks circle back, like someone wanted us wandering." Abram Hale brushed a wall and scowled at powder. He said, "Fresh blast dust, but no charge marks." Clara Wynn lifted a brass token from the gravel and studied its crest. She said, "Town seal, stamped clean, too clean for a gulch." Jesse Pike said, "Why would our own mark the trail?" Wind threaded the timbers and sang a thin warning. Ethan said, "Because someone wants our eyes where theirs ain't." From deeper inside came a clink, then silence that felt staged. Abram said, "We pull back and set a line." Clara nodded, but her gaze refused to leave the token. Jesse whispered, "If this is bait, we already bit." Ethan set the token down like a live spark. He said, "Then we spit it out before it burns the tongue." They retreated to a shelf above the gulch, where the wind carved knives from shade. Clara Wynn said, "The seal means access, not courage." Ethan Cole watched the road and counted riders under his breath. He said 2 more joined, riding easy like they own the dust. Abram Hale said, "We bury the crest, and the thought of it. Jesse Pike said, "If Silas Crane sent them, we ride blind under his lamp." Far below, the sun slid a blade across the canyon floor. Clara said, "Truth shows at angles, never straight on." Ethan nodded, and the motion felt like a sentence. He said, "We wait for their mistake and make ours smaller." The hawk circled again, measuring the ground with its shadow. Abram said, "Shadow or not, a ledger writes in daylight." The shelf held their weight, but not their trust. Hoofbeats braided with the wind, then broke apart as 3 riders split the trail. Jesse Pike said, "They are searching like hounds." Abram Hale said, "Hounds turn when they taste steel." Clara Wynn drew a careful breath and steadied her hands. Ethan Cole said, "Hold until their eyes pass us." A pebble betrayed them, skittering loud as a shot. One rider wheeled and pointed, the signal neat as script. Clara said, "So be it." Abram said short words, "Shorter fight." Ethan's revolver spoke first, and the ridge answered in echoes. Jesse fired and missed, then found his breath and the line. 2 riders broke and ran, the 3rd tumbled into thorn. Ethan said, "Leave the fallen, follow the fleeing." The wind carried powder smoke down the throat of the canyon. They ran the fugitives toward a dry wash where the earth kept secrets. Ethan Cole said, "Drive them to the narrows." Clara Wynn angled down and cut the corner clean. Abram Hale said, "Hold left, do not swallow their dust." Jesse Pike shouted a warning as a rope snapped from the brush. A hidden rider yanked, and Ethan's horse lurched sideways. Clara said, "Trap, pot." Abram fired once, severing the rope in a clap. Ethan rolled, hit stone and rose with a wince and a snarl. The fugitives vanished into scrub like handwriting erased by rain. Jesse said, "We nearly read our own epitaph." Ethan said, "Then we changed the script." The dry wash swallowed hoofprints and kept the rest. Dusk bruised the sky as they reached a shack stitched to the canyon wall. Clara Wynn said, "Shelter, not safety." Abram Hale kicked the door and found maps pinned like trophies. He said, "Road tolls, water rights, guard shifts, all neat." Jesse Pike traced a line to Whitlow and flinched. He said, "They draw us like cattle to a chute." Ethan Cole lifted a ledger stamped with the town's seal. He said, "Someone writes the story and signs our names." A floorboard moaned, and a hidden panel shifted open a breath. Inside lay cartridges, a whistle, and a list of payments. Clara said, "This was never about bandits." Ethan closed the ledger and felt the weight settle. He said, "It is a council of wolves, dressed for Sunday." The shack's maps burned in the fire pit, ash twisting like secrets set free. Clara Wynn said, "Destroying the proof won't clear the guilt." Ethan Cole said, "Guilt rides lighter than evidence." Abram Hale stamped the flames until sparks hissed into silence. Jesse Pike said, "The council will know we found it." Clara whispered, "They already know. They left it for us." The canyon wind carried the smell of charred paper and doubt. Ethan said, "They want us divided, and I won't oblige them." Abram's eyes narrowed, shadowed by years of mistrust. He said, "Division isn't their weapon. It's our weakness." Jesse asked, "Then where do we turn now?" Ethan looked toward Whitlow, where smoke smeared the horizon. He said, "Back to town. Truth belongs in the square, not in shadows." The road back stretched dry and narrow, lined with mesquite. Ethan Cole said, "Every step back is a challenge they count on." "What?" Clara Wynn said, "So we let them count, and we keep walking." Jesse Pike scanned the ridge with restless eyes. Abram Hale said, "Keep your head low, lad. Shadows carry rifles." A bullet cracked and chewed dust at Ethan's boots. Clara shouted, "Ambush!" Abram fired back, echo ripping across stone. Jesse stumbled, then crouched, firing clumsy but brave. Ethan said, "Push through the fire, don't trade it." More shots barked, each one guided by unseen hands. Clara said, they're testing distance, not killing yet. Ethan said, then they're saving the bullet with my name on it. They reached a dry creek where water once carved refuge. Ethan Cole leaned on a stone and caught his breath. Clara Wynn said, they're not hunting, they're herding. Abram Hale nodded, jaw tight. He said, driving us to town like stock to auction. Jesse Pike said, if Silas Crane holds the hammer, we'll hang on the bid. Ethan pressed his palm to the ground, feeling vibrations of hoofbeats. He said, they ride ahead to prepare the stage. Clara whispered, then the council is not just complicit, they're the authors. Abram spat dust, anger rough. He said, and we're the story they'll sell. Ethan rose, spine straight as iron. He said, then we rewrite it, even if the ink is blood. At the ridge above Whitlow they paused, the town below glinting with false calm. Clara Wynn said, from here it looks untouched. Ethan Cole said, peace is a mask and I can see the seams. Abram Hale studied rooftops through his spyglass. He said, guards posted at corners, rifles on rails. Jesse Pike shifted, whispering, they're waiting for us. Ethan said, then let them wait, we'll walk in daylight. Clara touched his shoulder, voice low. She said, daylight exposes more than shadows. Ethan answered, better they see us coming than find us broken. Abram lowered the glass, his face grave. He said, once we cross, there's no stepping back. Ethan said, redemption never had a reverse road. Twilight cloaked Whitlow's main street as they entered. The townspeople stared, whispers heavier than shouts. Ethan Cole said, eyes speak truer than mouths here. Clara Wynn said, then listen hard. Abram Hale barked council's hall, straight through, no detours. Jesse Pike muttered, feels like we're riding into a sermon. The saloon doors creaked, faces vanishing into corners. Ethan said, fear's thicker than dust tonight. Clara replied, dust settles, fear lingers. Silas Crane stood on the courthouse steps, smile carved in stone. He said, welcome home, Ethan. The town has missed you. Ethan's voice cut cold. He said, home doesn't chain its own. Silence rolled across the street like thunder waiting for strike. The courthouse hall smelled of ink, sweat, and deception. Ethan Cole said, truth doesn't wait for votes. Silas Crane smiled thin and said, truth is what men believe, not what's written. Clara Wynn stood beside Ethan, hand near pistol. She said, belief crumbles under evidence. Abram Hale dropped the charred ledger on the table. He said, your council's seal marks every page. Gasps rippled through the gathered townsfolk. Jesse Pike whispered, they see it now. Silas laughed low. He said, paper burns, memory bends, power stays. Ethan's eyes hardened. He said, not when blood inks the ledger. Silence spread wide, heavy with choice. Voices clashed like iron in the hall, fear sharpening every word. Clara Wynn said, your power starves them. Silas Crane raised his hands like a preacher. He said, I kept this town alive when no one else dared. Abram Hale barked, you bled it dry and called it law. Ethan Cole said, you turned Whitlow into your mine. Jesse Pike shouted, then why do they whisper in hunger? The townsfolk stirred, murmurs swelling. Silas sneered, without me you are dust. Ethan said, dust feeds the earth, not tyrants. Clara's voice cut steady. She said, decide now who you serve, the land or his greed. The room bristled with shifting loyalties. The doors burst open, and a scarred rider staggered in with blood down his chest. He croaked, the council's coin pays bandits in the north. Gasps split the chamber. Ethan Cole stepped forward. He said, now the seal drips in red. Silas Crane's face twitched, but his smile held. Clara Wynn said, your lies run out when your victims walk in. Abram Hale shouted, this man bleeds proof. Jesse Pike caught the rider as he fell. Silas Crane said, a dying tongue buys no truth. Ethan answered, but it buys your guilt. The rider's hand clutched Ethan's sleeve before slipping lifeless. A silence fell harder than any gavel. The councilman whispered, eyes darting like cornered prey. Clara Wynn said, "You hid behind their robes, but they tear now." Abram Hale pounded his fist on the table. He said, "This town belongs to its people, not to one man's greed." Silas Crane raised his voice. He said, "Without me you drown in dust and bandits." Ethan Cole said, "Then we drown free." Jesse Pike shouted, "They'll never chain us again." The crowd surged, voices blending into a roar. Silas' mask cracked, his smile slipping. Clara said, "Step down or be dragged down." Ethan's voice echoed. He said, "Tonight the ground chooses justice." The council chamber trembled with the weight of the verdict unspoken. Night deepened as the council scattered, leaving Silas Crane cornered in his own hall. Ethan Cole said, "The town sees you now." Silas Crane's voice cut bitter. He said, "Power never fades, it only changes hands." Clara Wynn stepped closer, pistol drawn steady. She said, "Then it leaves yours tonight." Abram Hale said, "You had your reckoning, now comes ours." Jesse Pike whispered, "Do it, end his grip." Silas laughed once, sharp as glass. He said, "Kill me and you become me." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He said, "I end cycles, not repeat them." Silence pressed heavy as choice hung in the air. The hall became a stage for destiny's verdict. The courthouse emptied, but the night refused calm. Ethan Cole said, "His grip broke, but his shadow lingers." Clara Wynn stood watch by the door, pistol low but steady. She said, "Shadows stretch when light is weak." Abram Hale lowered his rifle and muttered, "Council cracked, yet wolves still circle." Jesse Pike said, "The people look to us, but we ain't their council." Ethan's jaw clenched. He said, "We're their shield until dawn." Outside, boots gathered, not cheers but warning. Silas Crane's loyal riders had not fled. Clara whispered, "They bring steel to reclaim him." Ethan said, "Then steel meets stone and stone endures." The wind outside whistled like a dirge. The street filled with mounted figures, rifles bristling like thorns. Abram Hale said, "We hold ground or we die trying." Jesse Pike's hands shook, but he gripped his carbine. He said, "Then let them taste it." Clara Wynn narrowed her eyes. She said, "This isn't war, it's reckoning." Ethan Cole stepped into the dust, voice steady. He said, "You serve a man already fallen." The leaders spat back, "We serve coin, not men." Gun barrels leveled, eyes sharp with greed. Clara said, "Then coin won't bury you proper." Ethan's stance drew fire before a trigger pulled. Abram muttered, "They'll break, but we'll bleed first." The silence before gunfire pressed harder than the storm. Gunfire cracked, tearing night open. Jesse Pike's first shot found wood, not flesh. He said, "Damn it." Abram Hale fired true, a rider tumbling from saddle. Clara Wynn moved swift, cover to cover, her pistol barking flame. Ethan Cole advanced, bullets grazing air near his coat. He said, "Push them back, don't let them claim the square." A horse screamed, chaos splintering formation. Jesse steadied, second shot ringing clear. Abram growled, "Keep pressure, lad, keep breathing." Clara reloaded smooth, smoke curling around her. Ethan's eyes blazed with grim resolve. He said, "This town won't kneel again." The square echoed with war, turned trial. The last shots faded, leaving only groans and hoofbeats fleeing. Abram Hale said, "They scatter like thieves denied spoils." Jesse Pike panted, sweat cutting through soot. He said, "I hit one. I truly hit one." Clara Wynn holstered her pistol, scanning shadows. She said, "Not all are gone. Silence hides knives." Ethan Cole stood still, revolver heavy in hand. He said, "The square is ours for now, but their cause lingers." Clara touched his arm, voice low. She said, "Cause dies when truth lives." Ethan answered, Then truth must roar louder than gunfire. Abram sighed, weight of years bending him. He said, truth's roar costs blood, and we've spilled plenty. Dawn broke slow, painting the street in red gold. Townsfolk emerged, eyes wide with cautious hope. Jesse Pike said, they look to us like we're saviors. Abram Hale muttered, saviors don't leave blood in gutters. Clara Wynn said, but we stood when others fled. Ethan Cole's voice carried steady. He said, I didn't stand for them. I stood to finish what I began. Clara looked at him, searching his face. She said, redemption doesn't come by accident. Ethan's gaze held the rising sun. He said, redemption comes by final reckoning. The townsfolk bowed heads, whispers rising. Whitlow breathed, but the weight of night still clung. Dawn found Whitlow holding its breath, the sky bruised and bright. Ethan Cole said, he will not crawl away in daylight. Clara Wynn said, then we pull the mask and show the face. Abram Hale checked the loads and frowned at the quiet. Jesse Pike said, if he runs, I ride him down. The courthouse doors opened like a dare. Silas Crane stepped out in a polished coat and colder smile. He said, you own noise, I own order. Ethan answered, order without mercy is a cage. Clara said, cages splinter when truth hammers. Footsteps gathered, the street a drum for hearts that would not hide. The square became a circle drawn in grit. Silas Crane said, lay down guns, and I spare your town. Ethan Cole said, you spare nothing you cannot price. Clara Wynn said, your ledgers end today. Abram Hale called out names of the lost like tolling bells. Jesse Pike said, debt collected, coin or courage. Silas laughed once and raised his pistol like a seal. He said, I built Whitlow from fear and drought. Ethan said, then you built a grave. The wind dragged old posters across their boots. The first step forward felt like stepping onto a gallows made of light. Gunfire snapped like ropes breaking. Silas Crane fired first. The shot a miss meant to rattle. Ethan Cole moved, coat lifting like a torn flag. Clara Wynn said, left rail. She cut the angle and drew fire wide. Abram Hale's bullet shaved stone near Silas' heel. Jesse Pike steadied and hit a brass badge from a guard at the door. Silas said, you will not rewrite me. Ethan answered, I only write the ending. He slid and fired once. The echo rolled away, and silence stood very still. Silas Crane fell to one knee, the iron slipping from his hand. He said, power returns in another face. Ethan Cole said, not if we teach the ground to refuse it. Clara Wynn knelt close and pushed the pistol away. She said, your threat is finished. Abram Hale said, the town decides the rest. Jesse Pike whispered, let Whitlow breathe. Ethan stepped back as if leaving a confession on the floor. He said, justice stands without my shadow. The sunlight climbed the courthouse stones like a benediction without words. Noon bells rang, and the square answered with calm. Ethan Cole said, I came for debt and found a road. Clara Wynn said, then walk it while it is yours. Abram Hale said, Whitlow will mend in honest daylight. Jesse Pike said, I will keep the watch clean. Ethan looked to the ridges where storms are born. He said, sometimes the land does not forgive. Clara held his gaze. She said, but it remembers who tried. Ethan set his hat brim low and turned toward the sun, lighter by one burden and heavier by its meaning.